The sound of glass shattering was what made Evan finally get up from his chair. He had heard arguments through the thin apartment walls before, muffled voices, sometimes a cry that made his stomach twist, but this time was different. This time, something in the tone of it made him drop his book and move. He'd lived next door to Lena for almost a year. She was the kind of neighbor who smiled politely in the hallway, but never lingered long enough to talk. Once, when he helped her carry groceries, he noticed the shadows under her eyes. He'd wanted to ask if she was all right, but she'd said, "Thanks," then disappeared behind her door. Now, as he stood in the hallway, her door was half open. A man's voice roared from inside, harsh and slurred. Evan could make out fragments, words soaked in anger, accusations about where she'd been, who she'd talked to. Then another crash, a dull thud, and a small, frightened sound that didn't even sound human anymore. That was it. Evan's hand shook, but he pushed the door fully open. The scene inside hit him like a punch. The coffee table flipped, a chair splintered, and Lena pressed into the corner of the room, her boyfriend towering over her. His hand was raised. "Hey!" Evan's voice came out louder than he expected. "That's enough." Both of them turned toward him. The man, Jake, Evan remembered the name from the mailboxes, sneered. "This isn't your business," he said, his words thick with alcohol. "It is now." Evan stepped between them before he could think better of it. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you're some kind of hero?" He spat. "You don't know her like I do." "I don't have to," Evan said quietly. "You need to leave." Jake took a step closer, close enough that Evan could smell the beer on his breath. For a second, Evan thought he'd swing, but something in Evan's expression must have changed his mind. Jake's eyes flickered, then dropped to Lena, as if to remind her of something only she would understand. Finally, with a muttered curse, he shoved past Evan and slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Evan turned, expecting Lena to be furious with him for interfering. Instead, she just stared at the door, trembling, her arms wrapped around herself. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. Her eyes darted to the broken glass on the floor, to the overturned furniture, as though she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. When Evan took a step toward her, she flinched. He froze. "It's okay," he said quickly, raising his hands. "I'm not going to touch you. I just want to make sure you're safe." Something about his voice, calm, steady, patient, seemed to reach her. After a long moment, she nodded. He helped her pick up a few of the things that had fallen, careful to give her space. Every sound seemed amplified. The crunch of glass underfoot, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint sob she tried to hide. When it became clear she couldn't stay there that night, Evan offered, "My aunt's cabin is empty. It's about an hour out of town. It's quiet, and no one knows it's there. You can rest." Lena hesitated. Her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. "I don't want to be a problem." "You're not," he said. "You just need somewhere safe." That word safe seemed to undo her. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back, nodding. "Okay." Evan grabbed a small duffel bag, filled it with the essentials she pointed out. A few clothes, her phone charger, her grandmother's locket. She never asked what would happen if Jake came back. And Evan didn't tell her that he'd already called the police on his way out the door. The drive was quiet. Rain had started to fall, streaking the windshield in silver lines. Lena stared out the window, her face reflected faintly in the glass. Evan didn't speak. He just kept one hand steady on the wheel, as if that alone might keep the world from falling apart again. When they reached the cabin, he showed her inside, flicked on the lights, and said simply, "You can lock the door from the inside. I'll sleep on the porch swing if you want me nearby." She nodded again, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." As Evan stepped back into the cool night air, he heard the faint click of the lock behind him, a small sound, but one that felt like a promise. For the first time in a long while, someone was safe. The first night in the cabin was silent in a way that felt unnatural. No traffic, no neighbors, no angry voice pounding through the walls. Just the sound of wind through the trees and the steady drip of rain from the roof. Lena didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, staring at her hands. Her palms still felt raw where she'd clenched her fists, her skin marked with small cuts from the broken glass. The lamp beside her cast a soft yellow light, making the room look almost unreal, like she'd stepped out of her life and into someone else's. Outside. Through the thin curtain, she could see the outline of Evan sitting on the porch swing. He hadn't said much since they arrived. He'd shown her where everything was, the bathroom, the kitchen, the blanket folded on the bed, and then quietly excused himself to give her space. She didn't know what to make of him. He wasn't like other men she'd known, no quick glances, no heavy silence waiting to be filled with apology or demand. He just was there, steady and still, as if the chaos she brought with her hadn't frightened him off. When morning came, she found him making coffee on the small gas stove. He looked up, offered a hesitant smile. "Morning," he said. "There's food if you're hungry. I didn't know what you'd want, so I just brought what I had." She noticed the small carton of milk, a few apples, some instant oatmeal packets. Nothing fancy, but it felt like the kindest thing anyone had done for her in months. "Thank you," she said, her voice small. They ate in quiet. The coffee was too bitter, but it was warm. After a while, Evan leaned back in his chair. "I called the police last night," he said gently. "Told them what happened. They'll probably want to talk to you when you're ready." Her spoon froze mid-her. I can't go back there," she whispered. "You don't have to." "Not yet. They can come here, or we can meet somewhere else. You're in control of that part." Those words, "you're in control," hit her harder than anything. For so long, her choices hadn't belonged to her. Every decision had been filtered through fear. What would make him angry? What would make him stay? What would keep her safe another day? Now someone was asking her what she wanted. She looked up at him, unsure if he understood the weight of what he'd just given her. His eyes were calm, steady, not pitying, just present. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "That's okay," he said. "You don't have to yet." They spent most of the day in near silence. Lena tried to help clean up the kitchen, fold the blankets, sweep the porch, but her hands trembled every time she heard a sudden sound. Evan pretended not to notice, but he always seemed to find a reason to move slowly, to never come up behind her, to give her space to breathe. By afternoon, she stepped outside. The forest smelled of rain and pine. The quiet should have been peaceful, but it made her uneasy, like her body didn't know how to exist without tension. She wrapped her arms around herself, unsure if she was cold or just empty. Evan appeared a few minutes later, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Mind if I sit?" She shook her head. They sat in silence again, sipping slowly. "Do you come here often?" she asked after a while. "Sometimes," he said. "It used to belong to my aunt. She left it to me when she passed. I come when I need to think." "It's quiet," she murmured. "Too quiet?" She almost smiled. "Maybe, but it feels safe." He nodded, not saying anything more. As the sun began to sink, turning the sky soft orange, Lena realized she was breathing normally for the first time in weeks. The bruises on her skin still hurt, but the ache inside her, the constant fear, had eased just a little. That night, as she lay down again, she heard the faint creak of the porch swing. Evan was outside, keeping watch like before. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, police reports, maybe court, maybe confrontation, but for now, she was safe. And safety, she thought, was the first step toward freedom. For a few days, the cabin existed outside of time. Lena began to fall into small routines, making coffee before Evan woke up, sweeping the porch, folding her borrowed sweater neatly over the back of a chair each night. She still startled easily at the groan of the wind, at footsteps behind her, but the raw panic had faded to a quieter kind of alertness. Evan didn't push her to talk. Sometimes they worked side by side in silence, him chopping wood, her reading an old novel she found on a shelf. Sometimes, late at night, she'd ask questions about his life in the city, and he'd answer with careful honesty. He never asked about Jake, but the outside world hadn't forgotten her. It started with a phone call she didn't answer. Then another. The same number. Then texts, short, sharp messages that made her hands tremble. "Where are you? You think you can just run off with him? You'll regret this." Evan noticed the way she flinched when her phone lit up. One evening, as they were cleaning up after dinner, he said quietly, "You can change your number, you know." "I know," she said. Her voice was tired. "It's just, everything I had was tied to that number. My job, my friends." She paused. "If I still have any?" He dried his hands on a towel. "You will. The right ones will understand." But she wasn't sure she believed that. By the end of the week, the rumors had started to spread, small-town gossip traveling faster than truth ever could. People whispered that she'd been cheating on Jake for months, that Evan had stolen her, that she'd gone off with him by choice. Lena found out from her old coworker, who called just to see how she was. The woman's tone was syrupy and sharp all at once. "You and your neighbor, huh? I guess everyone knew something was going on." Lena felt the blood drain from her face. "There wasn't. He was helping me." "Sure," the woman said, drawing out the word like it had too many syllables. "That's what they all say. Anyway, people talk." After she hung up, she sat on the porch steps for a long time, staring at the dark tree line. Evan came out quietly, carrying a mug of tea. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat beside her. Finally, she said, "They think I ran away with you." He didn't seem surprised. "Small towns have long memories," he said, "and short attention spans. It's not fair to you," she said. "You helped me, and now people are saying—" He stopped her with a small shake of his head. "Let them say what they want. I don't care." But she could see in his eyes that he did. Not for himself, but for her. That night, when she went to bed, she overheard him on the porch, talking quietly on the phone. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of anger in it. "She doesn't need people judging her right now," he said. "She needs space. Tell them to stop." It made something in her chest ache. Not pity, not gratitude, but something harder to name. The next morning, she found him fixing the loose railing on the porch. "You don't have to keep doing things for me," she said. He looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I know. Then why do you?" He met her gaze, steady and unguarded. "Because someone should have done them for you a long time ago." She turned away quickly so he wouldn't see her eyes fill with tears. Later that day, she went into town for the first time since the night she left. She needed groceries, and Evan insisted she shouldn't have to hide. But the moment she walked into the small market, the conversations around her went quiet. Eyes followed her down the aisles, curious, judgmental, knowing. When she reached the counter, the cashier forced a smile. "You're with that guy from the old Walker place, right?" Lena froze. "He's a friend." The smile sharpened. "Sure. Well, tell your friend hi." Outside, she sat in the truck for a long time before Evan asked, "You all right?" She nodded, though her throat felt tight. "They think they know what happened. Then we'll just show them they're wrong," he said. But she wasn't sure how. Because sometimes words, once set loose, had a way of becoming truth whether you wanted them to or not. That night, she couldn't sleep. The whispers in town had followed her home, echoing in her head. She wondered if she'd ever escape them, or if every act of kindness would always be turned into a lie. And yet, when she looked out the window and saw Evan sitting on the porch again, she felt something small and stubborn flicker inside her. Not just safety this time, but trust. Maybe, she thought. That was how healing really began. One rumor, one fear. One night at a time, days turned into a quiet rhythm again. But something inside Lena wouldn't settle. She kept replaying the whispers, the stares in town, the words she couldn't forget. You and your neighbor, huh? Evan never brought it up again. If the rumors bothered him, he didn't show it. He still chopped wood in the mornings, fixed things around the cabin, and made sure she always had the first cup of coffee. But sometimes, when she caught him staring out at the woods, his jaw set tight, she could tell the gossip had found its way under his skin. The worst part was that it was her fault. At least, that's how it felt. He'd given her safety, and she'd paid him back with scandal. He'd done nothing wrong, and yet, in everyone else's eyes, he'd crossed a line. One evening, Lena found him out back repairing the old fence. The light was fading, the forest behind him bathed in gold. He worked quietly, sleeves rolled up, every movement precise and steady. She stood there a moment, watching him, and then forced herself to speak. You don't have to keep fixing things here, she said. I'm not planning to stay forever. Evan looked up, a faint smile on his face. I know, but it's easier to keep busy. She hesitated. Because of me? Because sitting still makes me think too much, he said simply, driving another nail into the wood. She stepped closer, folding her arms. About what people are saying. He met her eyes for a second, long enough that she saw a flicker of something unspoken, then went back to his work. They'll move on. They always do. But she could hear the weight behind the calmness. He was trying to protect her again, even from her own guilt. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she said softly. You didn't ask for it, and now everyone, Lena, he interrupted gently, lowering the hammer. You don't owe me an apology. Yes, I do. Her voice cracked. You lost your privacy, your peace, because you helped me. That's not fair. Evan leaned on the fence, looking out toward the trees. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of birds settling in the branches. Finally, he said, fair doesn't have much to do with it. You needed help. I could give it. That's all. But people think, she started, let them. His tone was calm again, but firmer now. You can't spend your life trying to change what people think. Trust me, I've tried. She frowned. You talk like you know. He gave a small shrug. Small town. Big mouths. Everyone's been the villain in someone else's story. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then, almost shyly, she asked, What were you accused of? He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Nothing as dramatic as this. Just being the wrong kind of quiet when people wanted noise. There was something sad in that, something she understood too well. That night, she insisted on cooking dinner. It wasn't much, pasta from a box, a jar of tomato sauce, but it felt like a small way to repay him. When she set the 2 bowls down, he looked almost startled. You didn't have to, he said. I know, she replied, echoing his earlier words. But it's easier to keep busy. He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen on him in days. As they ate, the air between them began to thaw. He told her about his job, the construction work he did off and on, and how the cabin was the only place that ever felt like his. She told him about her grandmother's garden, the one place she'd felt safe as a kid. It wasn't much, but it was something shared. A thread connecting 2 people who didn't quite know how to exist in peace yet. After dinner, as she washed the dishes, she caught her reflection in the dark window. The bruises on her face had faded, leaving faint shadows like ghosts of old pain. But behind her, Evan's figure moved slowly through the cabin, putting things away, the lamplight soft around him. Steady, reliable, real. That's when it hit her. She wasn't just grateful. She cared. And that realization brought a wave of new guilt, because caring for him, even in the quiet, private way she did, felt like betraying the line he'd drawn so carefully. He'd never touched her, never hinted at anything beyond kindness. And yet her heart kept filling the silence between them with things she couldn't say. Later, when she stepped outside, she found him again on the porch swing. The same spot he'd taken every night since that first day. "Can I sit?" she asked. He nodded for a long while. They sat side by side, the night humming softly around them. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "I don't know how to thank you." He looked over at her. "You just did." And for the first time, she believed him. The air between them changed slowly, like the way summer slips into autumn without anyone noticing until the leaves start to fall. At first, it was small things. Evan started leaving the cabin earlier in the mornings, saying he needed to pick up work in town. He came back later, often after dark, and Lena would hear the truck engine fade into the distance long before. She saw the headlights through the trees. When he was home, he was kind as always, polite, calm, careful, but something in him had gone quiet. The warmth in his eyes, the easy rhythm of their conversations, had dulled. Lena told herself not to take it personally. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe the weight of what he'd done, what he was still doing for her, had finally caught up to him. But a small voice inside her whispered something harder to face. Maybe he was creating distance on purpose. One afternoon, after a week of this quiet drift, she finally asked. He was sitting on the porch, repairing a loose shutter when she came outside. "You've been avoiding me," she said. He didn't look up right away. "I've just been working. That's not what I mean." He sighed, setting down the screwdriver. "Lena," he rubbed a hand over his face. "You've got enough to deal with. You don't need me hanging around all the time." "I want you around," she said before she could stop herself. The words came out too fast, too raw. He froze, eyes lifting to hers. There was something unreadable there. Surprise, maybe pain. Then he looked away. "That's exactly why I need to be careful." She blinked. "Careful? You're still healing," he said quietly. "You've been through hell, and I don't want to confuse that. You might think you feel something because I helped you, but that's not the same as, 'Don't tell me what I feel,'" she cut in. The sharpness in her voice surprised both of them. He looked at her then, really looked, and she felt her heart stutter under the weight of his gaze. "I'm not trying to," he said. "I just don't want to be another person who takes something from you before you're ready to give it." The words hung between them, gentle, protective, and impossibly heavy. Lena turned away, swallowing hard. "You think I don't know the difference between kindness and what I want?" He stood slowly, brushing dust from his hands. "Sometimes the line isn't as clear as it feels." Then he walked past her and went inside, leaving her standing on the porch, staring at the empty space where he'd been that night. Lena lay awake long after the cabin went dark. Every sound reminded her of him, the floorboard that creaked when he paced, the faint murmur of his voice when he talked to himself while fixing something, the soft scrape of his chair against the floor. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It hadn't been for a while. He'd become her constant, the quiet center she'd started to build her days around. And now that he was pulling away, the safety she'd found in him felt fragile again, like a shell beginning to crack. She told herself it was selfish to want more from him. He'd already given her everything she needed: protection, peace, a chance to breathe again. But part of her, the part that had been numb for so long, was starting to feel alive again. And it scared her. In the morning, she found a note on the kitchen counter, written in Evan's careful handwriting. Went into town to take a few jobs. Won't be back until late. Food's in the fridge. You'll be okay. She stared at it for a long time. The last line, "You'll be okay," should have comforted her, but instead it felt like a goodbye disguised as reassurance. The day stretched endlessly. She cleaned, walked the trail behind the cabin, tried to read, but every page blurred together. She realized how quiet the cabin was without him. Not peaceful quiet, but hollow. When his truck finally pulled in after sunset, she was waiting on the porch. "Long day?" she asked, trying to sound casual. He nodded. "Yeah, got a few calls lined up for next week. I might stay in town a few nights." The words hit her like cold water. "You're leaving?" "Just for work." His voice was gentle, but there was distance in it again. "You'll be fine here. You don't need me." She almost laughed, but it came out as something closer to a sob. "That's what you think?" He didn't answer. She looked at him for a long time, searching for something, anger, regret, anything, but his expression was steady, heartbreakingly kind. "Okay," she said finally, stepping aside to let him pass. When he walked inside, she stayed on the porch. The night air was cool, and somewhere in the woods a bird called out. She folded her arms and stared into the darkness, realizing that the safety he'd built for her had turned into something else entirely, something she wasn't ready to lose. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if the walls around her were protecting her or keeping her from moving toward him. The next few days felt strangely empty without Evan. He left early, returned late, and when he did come back, he spoke less and less. Lena tried to convince herself that the distance was necessary, that he needed space. That maybe she did too, but the silence was unbearable. She found herself pacing the cabin at night, checking the locks twice, listening for sounds that weren't there. Without him on the porch, the dark felt thicker. She hadn't realized until now how much safer she felt just knowing he was near. One evening, the quiet shattered. It began with a sound faint at first, almost mistaken for the wind. Then the crunch of tires on gravel. A car pulling up the long dirt road that led to the cabin. Lena's heart froze. No one came out here. No one should have known she was here. She moved to the window, her pulse hammering. A dark car idled just beyond the trees, engine rumbling low. The headlights cut through the dusk like twin knives. Then the door opened and she saw him, Jake. For a second, she couldn't move. Her breath caught in her throat, and every memory she tried to bury came rushing back. The shouting, the fear, the helplessness. He slammed the car door and started up the path. "Lena!" he shouted. "I know you're in there." Her body reacted before her mind did. She grabbed her phone. No signal. She tried the back door. Locked. Panic surged. She looked around for anything she could use to protect herself. Her hand found the old flashlight on the counter. It was small, but heavy enough to hold tight. The front door rattled under his pounding. "You think you can hide from me?" Then another sound. Tires again, fast this time, tearing up the gravel road. Evan's truck. Lena almost sobbed in relief. Evan was out of the truck before it stopped moving, slamming the door behind him. "Back away from the house, Jake," he shouted. His voice was steady, but the anger beneath it was sharp as glass. Jake turned, sneering. "There he is, the hero. You take what's mine and then play the good guy. You think she really wants you?" Evan took a step forward. "You need to leave." "Right now, or what?" Jake spat, closing the distance. "You gonna hit me? That's what she deserves, isn't it? Someone who fights for her." The words made Lena's stomach twist. She wanted to shout, to tell Jake he was wrong. But before she could, Jake shoved Evan hard in the chest that Evan didn't swing back. He steadied himself, jaw tightening. "I'm not going to fight you," he said. "But I'll stop you if you try to hurt her again." That only enraged Jake more. He lunged forward, and this time Evan met him halfway, grabbing his arm and forcing him back. The two men struggled, stumbling toward the porch steps. "Evan!" Lena screamed, running forward. Jake swung, his fist connecting with Evan's jaw, but Evan didn't fall. He caught Jake by the collar and pushed him back, breath ragged. "You need to walk away before you do something you can't take back," he said through clenched teeth. Then, flashing red and blue lights appeared through the trees. Sirens. Someone, maybe a neighbor miles down the road, must have called the police. Jake froze, eyes darting toward the lights. For a moment, his bravado cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. "You'll regret this," he hissed, but his voice trembled. Then he turned, stumbling down the path as the police cars pulled up. Lena didn't move until the officers dragged Jake away. The adrenaline drained out of her all at once, leaving her shaking. She turned to Evan, who was standing there, breathing hard, blood on his lip. He looked at her, eyes softening. "You okay?" She nodded, though her voice broke. "I am now." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I told them I loved you," she whispered. Evan blinked, still catching his breath. "What?" "The rumor's back in town. I told them I loved you." Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. "I said it because it was the only thing that felt true." For a long moment, he didn't speak. The sirens faded. The woods went still, and all she could hear was her own heartbeat. Then he stepped closer, slow and cautious, as if afraid to cross a line. "Lena," he said quietly, "you don't owe me that." "I know," she said. "That's why I mean it." He exhaled, a small, disbelieving sound, and the tension in his shoulders finally broke. He reached out, not to pull her close, not to claim her, but to steady her, his hand resting gently on her arm. "I just wanted you safe," he said. "I know," she whispered. "And that's what made me love you." The wind moved through the trees, carrying away the last echoes of chaos. For the first time in months, Lena felt like she could breathe again, not because someone had saved her, but because she'd finally saved herself enough to speak the truth. The police lights faded into the night, leaving only the chirp of crickets and the faint hum of engines disappearing down the long dirt road. Lena stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, watching the dark swallow the last glimmer of blue and red. Jake was gone. For real, this time. The officers had promised to keep him in custody, that charges would be filed. She didn't know what the legal process would look like, and honestly, she didn't care. For the first time in a long while, the fear that had lived under her skin wasn't louder than her heartbeat. Evan was still standing beside the steps, rubbing the bruise on his jaw with the back of his hand. There was blood at the corner of his lip and a rip in his sleeve where Jake had grabbed him. When she looked at him, guilt twisted in her chest again, but this time it wasn't guilt for what others thought. It was guilt that he had been hurt because of her. She took a step forward. "You need ice," she said softly. He gave a half smile. "I've had worse. That's not the point." When she came closer, he didn't move away, but he didn't reach for her either. She could feel the hesitation between them, the invisible line that had defined their relationship since the beginning. It was a line drawn by respect, but also by fear, his fear of crossing it, and hers of being misunderstood. Lena reached out, gently touching his jaw. "You shouldn't have had to fight for me again." His voice was low. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because no one should ever have to fight alone." Her hand dropped, but her eyes didn't leave his. That sounds like something someone says when they're trying not to admit what they really feel. He huffed a soft laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You've gotten bold. You made me feel safe enough to be." That silenced him. The space between them filled with the sound of wind through the trees, the faint creak of the porch boards beneath their feet. Finally, he said, "When you told me you loved me, did you mean it? Or were you trying to convince yourself you weren't afraid anymore?" Lena thought about it, really thought. The word love had once felt dangerous to her, a thing people said to control or excuse or soften pain. But when she said it to him, it hadn't been about ownership or desperation. It had been about peace. "I meant it," she said simply. "Not because you saved me, but because you never tried to own me. You gave me back my voice." Evan's expression softened, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. "That's all I ever wanted for you," he said. "To see you stand on your own." "I know," she said quietly. "But even people who stand alone still get to choose who stands beside them." He blinked, as if the words startled him more than Jake's fists ever could. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I don't know what this is supposed to look like," he admitted. "I don't want to ruin what you've started rebuilding." "Then don't," she said. "Just be here. That's enough." Evan looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that holds both fear and hope. That feels like standing at the edge of something you're not sure you deserve. Then he stepped closer. He didn't kiss her. He didn't even touch her face. He just reached up, brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and whispered, "Okay." It wasn't a confession. It was an agreement. The night grew colder, and they went inside together. Evan sat on the couch while Lena fetched ice for his jaw. She pressed the small bag against his skin, careful, gentle. "Hurts?" she asked. "A little," he said. "Worth it, though." She smiled faintly. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I might start believing you mean them." He looked at her, a quiet, steady gaze that said more than words ever could. "I do." And for the first time, she didn't look away. The rest of the night passed without words. They didn't need them. The world outside was still uncertain, police reports, recovery, rumors, but inside that small cabin, something fragile and real had begun to take shape. Not rescue. Not gratitude. Not even romance, not yet. Something truer. Two people who had learned that love isn't about saving each other, it's about choosing each other. Again and again, even after the stormed out winter came early that year. The first snow dusted the cabin roof in thin silver lines, and the air grew sharp enough to turn breath into smoke. By then, Lena had been gone for almost 3 months. She'd left the cabin in late summer, not because she wanted to run again, but because it was time to stand on her own. Evan had driven her to the edge of town, both of them pretending the trip was practical, just a matter of distance and logistics. Neither of them said what they were really thinking, that the quiet safety they built had become something harder to walk away from. She moved into a small apartment above a bakery, took a job at the library, and started therapy. The first few weeks were strange, full of noise, faces, the hum of a world she hadn't belonged to in a long time. But each morning she woke a little lighter. Each night she slept without checking the locks 3 times. The scars faded, not the ones on her skin, but the ones made of habits and fears. She learned to breathe in crowds again, to laugh without looking over her shoulder. She learned how to be alone without being lonely. And yet, there were moments when her mind wandered back to the cabin, to the way the forest smelled after rain, to the sound of Evan's voice in the quiet, to the way the porch swing creaked like a heartbeat at night. They kept in touch, at first through short messages. He'd text when the generator broke or when he caught sight of a fox near the cabin. She'd send him pictures of books she thought he'd like. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Then, as autumn turned to frost, the messages stopped needing excuses. He wrote, "The leaves are almost gone. The place looks empty without you." She replied, Maybe it's just waiting for spring. One morning in early December, Lena took a drive. The sky was pale gray, the kind that promised snow. The road to the cabin was half covered in frost, but her hands didn't shake on the wheel. When she pulled up to the clearing, she sat there for a moment, heart steady but full. The cabin looked smaller than she remembered, its roof glittering with ice. Smoke rose from the chimney. He was home. When she stepped out of the car, the cold bit at her cheeks. She hesitated at the porch steps, unsure if she should knock or just walk in. But before she could decide, the door opened. Evan stood there, bundled in an old sweater, hair tousled, eyes lighting up in that quiet way that said everything without needing words. "You came back," he said. She smiled. "You left the porch light on." He looked at it, the small yellow bulb glowing in the gray morning, and chuckled softly. "Guess I did." They stood there for a moment, the silence between them easy now. No tension, no guilt. Just two people who had walked through the worst parts of themselves and found each other on the other side. "Want some coffee?" he asked finally. "Only if you made it strong," she said. He grinned. "Wouldn't dare make it weak." Inside, the cabin was warm, familiar. The furniture was the same, but the air felt different, lighter somehow. Lena set her gloves on the table, breathing in the scent of pine and coffee and smoke. As she looked around, she realized she wasn't visiting the past. She was seeing the place as it truly was, not a hiding place, not a cage, but a beginning. Evan handed her a mug and sat across from her. "How's life in town?" "Messy," she said, smiling. "But it's mine." He nodded, eyes soft. "That's all that matters." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching snow start to fall through the window. It came down slow and steady, covering the ground like a clean slate. Finally, Lena said, "You were right." "About what?" "About standing on my own." She paused, then added, "But I think I'm ready to stand with someone again, too. If you still want that." Evan didn't answer right away. He set his mug down, stood, and crossed the small space between them. Then, as gently as he'd done everything else, he took her hand. "I've wanted that since the day you stopped being afraid," he said. Lena looked out at the falling snow and felt something inside her settle, not the trembling relief of being rescued, but the calm certainty of choosing peace. Choosing him. Choosing herself. Outside, the world was quiet and new. Inside, two people sat together, the storm finally behind them.